afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ternanda. I'm the team leader of the Tibet Mountaineers. I have just introduced you. You have mounted on Qomolangma for 4 times in your lifetime. So, for such an experience, what's its difference for you personally? It's of course a significant event for me. I am in my 30s, and in my 30s, I've mounted on Qomolangma for 4 times. This is a rare experience compared with my peers. I have endured a lot. Some are unexperienced by the others. So that's very rich experience. So later on, we will ask you to share with us about your stories. Today is the 60th anniversary of the Chinese first mountain on the Qomolangma. So are there any activities prepared? Not long ago, we have a series of activities. The first one is about the garbage clearing and recovery. We have invited China Mountaineering Association and the spokesperson in Tibet and the media friends to be part of this event. The second activity was a workshop. We have also invited some well-known mountaineers to review the history of Chinese mountaineering expeditions. The third one is about the thematic party day event. It's the highest altitude where we held such a party day events. In the second half of this year, we will have other arrangements. So our viewers might be wondering now. The name Tsering Chey, what does it mean? This is Tibetan language, and in Tibetan, it means good fortune and long life. In Qomolangma, there are 5 very famous summits. One is mostly known as Qomolangma. The third one is Qomolangma among the 5 summits. So Tsering Chey shows our respect to those mountains so that more people will hear the stories of snow mountains. So according to you, there were 5 such summits. They're like sisters sitting together, and Tsering Chey is named after those mountains. The third one of the 5 sisters is Qomolangma. Exactly. And I know in the museum you have collected a lot of specimens about mountaineering, including the instruments from mountain. And today we will take you to watch 3 halls. One is the natural hall, the others are cultural hall. And in those halls, we will learn more about the plants and animals, and we will also have a look at the photos of the mountaineers. We're now standing outdoors, so our viewers must be anxious for us to go in for a closer look. So right beside the door, there are 2 paintings, 2 oil paintings. One was about 1964, when the Chinese firstly climbed the mountain. And that mountain ranked number 4 according to the altitude, above 8,000 meters high. And in 1964, the Chinese mountaineers started their expeditions. So you could look at my left-hand side. This is about how they climbed up. The snow was very deep, and in the oil paintings, we try to bring back the scenes for their climbing. They have encountered a lot of extreme weathers. We cannot take photos of those scenarios, so we put it on the paintings. On the right side, this is how the mountaineers are talking about the route of their climbing. They're taking the telescope in their hand and they're discussing for their expeditions. So we brought back two historical moments of Chinese mountaineering. In addition to Qomolangma, have you climbed other summits? I've never been to Xixiabaoma, but as we know, Xixiabaoma and Qomolangma could be said as two most sought-after mountains. Even amateurs are trying to stand on the summit of those two mountains. Xixiabaoma could be said as a relatively lower mountain, but for us, if we can mount on Xixiabaoma, it's easier for us to reach the target of standing on the top of Qomolangma. Yes, I've been looking forward to climb Xixiabaoma someday in the future. We know there are a lot of snow mountains for our choice, and there are a lot of plants and animals living in the mountainous areas. So those are some fossils in Himalaya. And there are some photos about the landforms of the mountain. As we know, Qomolangma is also one of the mountains in Himalaya. Those are the fossils in our knowledge. They present us the history. As we know, the Tibet Plateau is composed of Qomolangma and Himalaya and some others. And such a landform came into being because of the collapse of two continents of Asia and Europe, and many fossils came into being. Our museum collected those specimens and fossils, including the fossils of some marine lives. For example, this upper water stone. This is reed fossils. It's very interesting. Here, those are the rocks from the top of the 8,000-meter high mountain. In total, there are 14 of such mountains. In 1992, there was an expedition team to climb the 8,000-meter mountains. And for 14 years, they have completed the mission. And the mountaineers collected the rocks from the 14 mountains. And they have given those rocks to us, so it's very precious. For those Chinese mountaineers, they are meticulous. To be honest, I've been to Qomolangma for 4 times, but I haven't collected any rock from Qomolangma or put them back in my home. It never hit me to take something from the Qomolangma to memorize those moments. This is a commonplace fossil, the conch fossil. Of course, there are different shapes of the conch. And now you could see the patterns on the surface. It's well preserved. You may have seen such fossils a lot. Some conch doesn't have the clear patterns on the surface. For example, the stripes. So it's actually not just climbing the mountain, but also a further study of the landform. Yes, by climbing the mountain, we learn a lot about geology. For example, the formation of Qomolangma. And it's something to be learned about. Another topic is about crystal stone. Crystal stone studies have been the focus in recent years. It's very valuable activity. This area is home to a lot of mineral resources. For example, the iron ore, the granite, and so on. I graduated from China Geology University. So I did my homework about the different mineral resources and stones. But gradually, in my work, after graduation, those knowledge were forgotten. But now, through those specimens, they came back to me. This is the typical animal in Tibetan plateau, the Tibetan antelope. This place is a paradise for animals. In Himalaya, the commonplace animals are different types of antelopes. You will see those animals later on. We have put those specimens in our museum. This one, oil painting, is about the yak. So what is the role of the yak? And what's the content of this oil painting? This oil painting restores the daily lives of Tibetans and the yak. For mountaineers, yak is very important. Yak is like the source of production in Tibet. For us to climb up the Qomolangma, a lot of things have changed or reformed, but there is one thing unchanged, that is the need of transportation. And yak is the form of transportation. They are the carriers. We usually call the yak couriers because they're a team member of us mountaineers. Without yaks, it would be rather difficult for us to climb up the mountains because we have to carry those materials to a very high altitude. And yak has a lot of special features. For example, its stamina and its lungs capacity, and it's very resistant to cold, to low temperature. So yak is very important for Tibetans. Those are very old photos, right? Yes. Those are the photos and the papers published around 1960s. Those were reports about the scientific investigation of Qomolangma in those years. And in the photos, they were also taken in the 1960s. On the photos, we could see how the team members were investigating the routes of Qomolangma. Those are very precious photos. In this cabinet, there are other photos. They were taken about the scientific investigations before 1960 and about the climbing activities after 1960. Those four in the photos were the first group of Chinese who have mounted on the Qomolangma in 1960. The first one is named Shi Zhenchun. This is Wang Fuzhou. The third one is Gong Bu. And the fourth one is Qu Yinghua. For the other three, for the last three persons, they were standing on top of Qomolangma in 1960. It's black and white photos, and we have collected them through different channels. They are very precious, and they are original. Those are some other photos about climbing Qomolangma. This is Bingtaling, about how those mountaineers were passing by it. When did you start your journey of climbing Qomolangma? I started in 2006, and then I repeated my expedition in 2008. In 2008, it was the Olympic Games. I was part of the photographing group. Let's look at this oil painting. A very famous painter referred to a photo and restored it in the oil painting. We could see many details like the mask, the gloves, and the hat, and also the typical instrument, including the slope for protection. And also behind those mountaineers, that's the landscape of Himalaya. This person, if he successfully hit the top of Qomolangma, it would be his 11th time. Now we can see the slope. The slope has been laid on the snow by people like them. They are like the pioneers. They have created the routes towards the top of the summit. So, relatively speaking, the most difficult part of climbing up the Qomolangma has been completed by those people, laying the way for the others, yes. And in those photos, it's about the transportation and the daily lives of the team members. In the mountaineering team, every morning they have to do some exercise. So this one photo is about how those mountaineers did their morning exercise at about 5,000 meters high above sea level in their base camp. And the second photo is the first difficult part of Qomolangma. It's the route along the north slope of Qomolangma. It's very steep. So mountaineers have to rely on a lot of tools like the slope. This is the base camp. The mountaineers need some entertainment as well, not just the climbing. So this is about how those mountaineers have enjoyed their time of playing accordion. For us, I've been there. We usually play cards to entertain ourselves, so that before we hit on the road, we are not that nervous. Climbing the mountain should be boring, but we have to do something fun. From those photos, we could conclude that in those years, the climbing instruments were not so advanced as today. According to my knowledge, the climbing instruments before the 1990s were very simple. The mountaineers may just use the clothes or instruments directly from the army. So it's really something extraordinary for them to climb up the Qomolangma with just simple instruments and clothes. So now let's take a further look about the things used in the 1960s. How did they climb up the mountain? Like I said, the mountaineers may use the same things as the army. But then, with things changed, some companies and the national government studied more about mountaineering. So in the 1990s, those equipment turned very professional. There are two such exhibitions. This is about the summit of Xixiabaoma. This is a model of the mountain, Xixiabaoma. It's the only one mountain in the Chinese land at about over 8,000 meters high. And the red line represents the route of climbing. It's a traditional route. There are a lot of red flags. This is about our base camp. Regretfully, I've never been there, so I cannot introduce more details about this route. But this other one is in my province. It's about Qomolangma. I've been there. This is the sand table about Qomolangma. Up to today, there are over 20 routes of climbing Qomolangma. You could see the red line. This red line is the most traditional route. It's on the north slope, and there are at least 6 bases along this route. From where we are standing, this is the base camp of Qomolangma. This one is here. And after that, there are some transitioning camps. For example, there is one such camp at about 6,800 meters high. This is where we saw in the photo. And then it's 7,028, and finally 8,400 meters high, and then the summit. So there are a lot of such camps at different altitudes. The last one is called Zhangzi Summit. So this is the climbing route in the Chinese land area. How did you feel the first time you climbed Qomolangma? I know every time you go along this route, you have different feelings, but what about the first time? The first time I was there, I had a hard time. That's the first time I've climbed so high, and I was inexperienced. I climbed for over 6,000 meters high. And every time we met different weathers. Sometimes the weather is better, sometimes worse. So in the worst scenario, we may have some difficult times. For example, in 2008, I was in the photographing team. If we are wearing the sunglasses, we cannot see clearly. So when we take off our glasses, I was blind. I could see nothing for 24 hours. In 2012, I went there again as a photographer. My fingers were frozen, and they were bruised. As you know, if we wear very thick gloves, I cannot handle the photographing instruments and equipment very handily, so I took off my gloves and my hands were bruised because of the low temperature there. The experience is precious memory for me. Every time I climbed those mountains like Qomolangma, my experience accumulated, and time after time, I almost became a professional mountaineer. I've also been to other summits like the highest summit in North America, South America, and the South Pole. For me to accomplish such a mission like going to the other summits is because of my experience accumulated of climbing Qomolangma. In this map, it's about the names of the summits with very clear knowledge about their altitude. They are all shown in this one picture. It's an area shot about all of those mountains in our knowledge. On the right side, we can see Qomolangma standing there. The name has been written on the top, and it's 8,843 meters high, as has been put on the picture. In the exhibition hall, we see a snowman. The first time I came to this museum, I was attracted by the snowman. So could you tell us more about the snowman? In Himalaya, snowman is typical. The investigators and mountaineers have found the footsteps, the footprints of the snowman like this one. When the mountaineers discovered the footprints, they found that it's bigger than the usual size. So they took records of those footprints and started to learn more about snowmen. Of course, we have never really found any sign of snowman. We only saw the footprints. It's all our guessing. Snowman exists in our imagination just because of the trace of their footprints. If the snowmen do exist in Himalaya, then the human history will have to be rewritten. That's why many scientists are still doing their research about snowmen. The UK scientists also did the same thing. They did their own guessing about who are the snowmen. Maybe they're the descendants of some tribe. So we're still guessing till today. On the walls, there hang a lot of photos of those mountains and the animals. Could you introduce to us? We are now watching the photos of the 14 mountains with an altitude of over 8,000 meters high, including Qiaomi, Qomolangma, Ganchenshanjiang Summit, and Himalaya and Karakoram mountains. They are all above 8,000 meters. Something to be proud of is the Tibetan mountaineers in 2007 completed the mission of climbing all 14 mountains. And the rocks have been collected, as we have seen just now. Tibetan mountaineers are the first group of completing the climbing of all 14. We hit the record. So Tibetan expedition did something unprecedented internationally. Some person may have completed the mission of climbing all 14 mountains by themselves, but this is the first time for a complete team to accomplish it. So it's very difficult. It requires team spirit and coordination. It took the Tibetans 14 years to accomplish this mission. And we are about to visit the exhibition hall that we are all looking forward to, about climbing mountains itself. Just now on the walls hangs the precious animals and plants, the resources, and the historical records.
现在我们来到了就是我们整个这个次仁切阿雪山博物馆的一个主体的这样的一个展厅了。然后是按照
This is the main exhibition hall of this museum. It shows us the history of mountaineering and the stories. There are some famous people who have done the climbing of 14 mountains. Those equipment of climbing are actually the representation of climbing spirit. In this cabinet is the equipment for the French mountaineers. We could see the screws, the slopes, and the fixation equipment. This is the stove for cooking. It's used for the French people in early years. And this is the statue of the mountaineer. And that is the ladder, the slope. Why are we reserving the French history of climbing mountains? It's because we have to trace back to the Alps. The mountaineering technique, including the professional slopes, the professional knotting of the slopes and other equipment, and the entire mountaineering system could be traced back to the Alps, like the Mont Blanc. On the two sides of the photo, there are the plates for skiboarding, so that the mountaineers would not sink into the snow. That is the boots. And the lower end, the panel of the boots, are usually made of the rocks. It's anti-slippery. Take another example. The snow environment requires us to have some poles. In 1923, the foreign mountaineers climbed Qomolangma, and this painting is about 1923. This is the camp. There are two milestones of climbing. One is about the history of climbing Alps, like the French history. The other one is Himalaya history. It's actually about climbing Qomolangma. One milestone was 1921, where people started the climbing of Himalaya. Then in the 1920s, the UK team started their expedition of Qomolangma. And there are some equipment shown here. For example, the oxygen inhaling mask. And this is oxygen bottle. This is the valve to adjust the pressure. This is the portable oxygen bottle. And on the bottom, those are all different types of oxygen bottles. In the 1920s, many equipment like the oxygen bottles, they were quite similar to those used in the army. They were very heavy, usually above 5 kilograms. So it's no small thing for the mountaineers. But now the oxygen bottles weigh about half of that. To the maximum, the mountaineers may have to carry 15 to 20 kilograms on their back. If the altitude is higher, the weight may change. Particularly when we climb down. When we want to go home, we usually have to carry more. The weight is very high. This one is about the first time of climbing Qomolangma and the reports of the history. The first human history of climbing Qomolangma was about Hillary from New Zealand climbing Qomolangma, representing the entire mankind. For the first Chinese to climb Qomolangma, they started from the north slope. It's also the first time for the entire mankind to climb through the north slope. Like I said, Xishanwangma was sitting in the Chinese land area and is the first mountain for the Chinese mountaineering team to climb. So those are the photos about the moments of climbing Xishanwangma. We are seeing the utilities and the equipment used, like the lamps and the sleigh to lay the snow area. So with those exhibitions, we could learn more about the history and the culture of climbing. We have introduced 60 years ago, when the Chinese firstly mount on the summit of Qomolangma. We have used some equipment, and those are the equipment used. The three heroes were in the photo, including Wang Fuzhou. They took our national flag there. There was a certificate to award their experience, and this is the statue of Chairman Mao. This is their drinking bottle, their sunglasses, their boots. Compared to what you are using when you climb the Qomolangma, those equipment must differ a lot. They're entirely different, because we are now going lightweight. Many high-tech materials are used right now, like waterproof, windproof, the isolation of low temperature, and so on. But in the early years, those equipment were very simple. That's why for many heroes and mountaineers tried the climbing, they were injured a lot. This oil painting was about the three climbing Qomolangma: Qu Yinghua, Gongbu, Wang Fuzhou. There was no photography record about how they climbed to the top of the Qomolangma, so we have to have the oil painting. There was one movie, Chinese movie called The Climbers. The Climbers tried to bring back the history of climbing Qomolangma. Yeah, that's about the movie. Wu Jing has visited our museum. This is their poster. They signed the poster. So he did his homework about the climbing history. Yes. 2 milestones were 1960 and 1975. He combined the 2 stories together to make it a movie called The Climbers. This is about 8,700 meters. At this point, the head of the 3 climbers tried to help them to climb up. In 1975, they did the same thing. Each one would stand on the shoulders of the others to form a ladder of people to climb up. Since you have climbed yourself, to you, what is the climbing spirit? It's a very broad concept, but the core of the spirit is about striving hard. You have to be persistent. Perseverance is required for climbing. Another spirit is called team spirit. No one person alone can accomplish the task. The team members have to coordinate with each other. Aside from the 2 spirits, we also need to have a sense of honor. You are climbing on behalf of your motherland. Without such a love for your motherland, you cannot make it. Climbing requires your physical strength, but also your spirit. For the photos hung on the wall, those were about the different milestones of climbing Qomolangma. Like the first UK expedition team, Owen and Marilyn. And then in the 1920s, different expedition teams came here, and we have collected the photos of them all. For example, here, Marilyn and the UK climbing teams are shown here. Those were all famous people. This one person have climbed all 14 of them with no oxygen bottle, and those were the Chinese heroes. In 1975, that is the photo about the climbing history in 1975. All of those photos could be said as the milestones of the history. Like you said, there is one school of climbing in Lhasa. Could you introduce more? The climbing school is called Himalaya Guidance School. It's established in 1999. It's to teach photography, logistics, and climbing. The school is another milestone of climbing history, because in the surface area of climbing mountains, it's a white canvas. With the establishment of the climbing school, the mountainous areas could send their trainees to be the service people. So we have changed the landscape of serving the climbing teams, particularly to climb the north slope of Himalaya. In the core areas or the border areas of Qomolangma, we have gathered the people from those areas. It's like a return to the society. They have come from the mountains, and now they may return back to their homeland to serve the other mountaineers. It's also a job opportunity. I myself graduated from a climbing school. So the climbing school has contributed a lot. For example, in 2003, the amateurs have benefited from the service people from the climbing school for logistics. So could you introduce more details about the service? For example, for amateurs to climb Qomolangma, they lack capacity. So for the students graduating from the climbing school, they could be the guide. For example, guiding them how to pave the way, how to establish a camp, or anything associated with climbing the mountain. For example, measuring in 2005, and for the torch relay, those guides played an important role. This cabinet shows us about the history of 1975. 1975 is a major event because in that year we have measured the height of Qomolangma in real sense, and it's determined to be 8,843 meters high. And that photo was the summit of the Qomolangma. They were doing their measurement of the height. And Madame Panduo was in the photo. She was the first Chinese woman to stand on the summit of Qomolangma. And those are the photographing equipment. Still, this is a poster about 1975. There were 9 people here. 9 climbers in 1975. We call them 9 warriors. This cabinet is about the photos and the things used for climbing the 14 mountains of Himalaya. We've seen them already just now. In the photo, there are a lot of team members, and gradually, because they age, some climbers cannot accomplish the task anymore. Finally, there are 3 people, Tsering Chey, Bianba Zhaxi, included. Those 3 coordinated with each other to accomplish the task of climbing all 14 mountains. We're not fighting this battle alone. We highlight the spirit of teamwork. In 2003, in the 50th anniversary of mankind's climbing of Qomolangma, we took another group of photos. In 2003, it's another milestone because before that year, most of the climbing activities were undertaken by professionals. It's like a political requirement, like Wang Shi, Yu Liang, and other entrepreneurs started to join this team. And the climbing school is serving those entrepreneurs and amateurs. So 2003 could be said as a turning point because starting from that year, the common people could join the team of climbing, like me. I want to put my focus of this because it's very great history. In 2008, the Olympic torch was relayed on the summit of Qomolangma. Climbing and Olympic Games were finally combined together. And this set of clothes was specially designed for climbing in 2008. We can see the design of the Olympic 2008, the torch, were all shown in the clothes. It's like a dream coming true in 2008. Olympic Games is like the paradise of sports, and Qomolangma is the paradise for climbing. So we combine the two dreams together. We finally did our contribution to Olympics and climbing as a Chinese. This is our guide school. The photo was taken by Nimatsen, the founder of the guide school. This is the school flag, the torch in 2008. In the photo, we could see all of those people were graduates of the guide school. And those photos were the 14 mountains with an altitude of over 8,000 meters, like Luozi summit. Luozi was right next to Qomolangma. They were like two close sisters. They stood shoulder by shoulder. So Luozi summit is in the surrounding of Qomolangma, and we have a bond with the mountain. I always say that mountain is a lifetime pursuit. It nurtures us. So anything like the model, the oil painting about the mountains, I have a strong feeling for them. So you mean unless you cannot accomplish the task physically someday, otherwise you will repeat the climbing? Yes, sometimes I dream about climbing the mountain. I send a lot of stories in my WeChat moments. In this one cabinet, those are the artifacts about skiing and snowboarding. Those materials used to be the garbages in the mountains. We recycled them to be artifacts. We will continue the garbage clearing work. In the beginning, you introduced that to mark the 60th anniversary of the Chinese first climbing Qomolangma, there was one event about clearing the garbages for Qomolangma. Yes, since we're living in the mountains, we have to protect the mountains, because we live on them. We invited some experts to help us make those artifacts. They're artists. There are some tents put up here. This one tent was used in 1960. If you compare it with the tents used today, you would realize how simple was this one used in 1960. It was a tough time. The Chinese mountaineers conquered various difficulties to climb Qomolangma. The fixation technique was very simple. For today, the poles of the tents are very cutting-edge technologies. We have done thorough studies of tents among the other equipment. This one statue was also an exhibition of the climbing spirit, the teamwork. I do think that what we are exhibiting in the museum is about the history of climbing. It's also about the personal growth as a climber. We learn from the exhibition. Climbing spirit could never grow old. And this is about different sorts of oxygen bottles. We recycled those bottles from above 8,000 meters high. And we also collect many cans to be artifacts. They are very popular. Many people want to collect those artifacts which used to be garbages. It's also about raising awareness of environment protection. Through recollecting the garbages of Qomolangma, we're publicizing the spirit of environment protection. Many visitors are now touring in the core areas of Qomolangma. Sorry, not core areas. It's forbidden to the public. But they can visit the climbing routes. So such an activity is a call of environment protection. Exactly. So you have seen the tents. This is sleeping bags. It's used in 1960. After 15 years, in 1975, the sleeping bag has been reformed. You could see the different properties like the heat retention and the portability. The one used in 1975 was more portable. And then if you compare the two with what we're using today, those two will be very backward. So from such an example, we could see the development of climbing history. So we're coming to a very high level. The amateurs of climbing may be wondering, will I have an opportunity of climbing Qomolangma? So could you give us some information? It's a very high threshold to climb Qomolangma. For example, the approval process is stringent. The local government will be the first step, and the mountaineering team will do another round of screening. You have to have preconditions, like you have climbed 6,000 meters and 7,000 meters high before, so your past experience mattered. Because climbing Qomolangma is a very dangerous activity, so we have high requirement for climbers. You have to have at least 3 to 5 years of climbing experience, based on which we allowed you to take your step towards Qomolangma. Some climbers are saying that I have stamina, I jog a lot, and now I want to climb Qomolangma. Impossible. Your physical strength or your jogging experience cannot represent your climbing. Before climbing Qomolangma, you have to exercise for a long time, and you have to experience the climbing of other summits. Another thing is, for the amateurs, you have to have a strong logistics team to serve you, like a guide, the logistics, the medics for high altitude. Only when you have all of those prepared, we will approve you. It's not an easy task to climb Qomolangma. It's not a fantasy. Some people may argue that a lot of people are climbing Qomolangma and the success ratio is already very high, but I have to say they've done a lot before doing the task. You need professional training and long time of exercise. Okay, now I get it. Climbing Qomolangma is no easy thing, but to visit the Tsering Chey Snow Mountain Museum, it's an easy thing for you. So by visiting this Snow Mountain Museum, you will learn a lot about the climbing history, and you will be basked in the climbing spirit. So you will start to think about your own life. How did the ancestors strive when they climb, and shall you better treasure your current life? You will think about the questions and ponder about them by visiting the museum. So we do encourage you to come and learn more about climbing. So now I want to thank you for your time this afternoon. Thank you for introducing a lot. So today, we have seen a lot of artifacts and equipment and learn about the culture of climbing. Our viewers might have stronger interest of visiting the museum. You could come to Zidan and let him take you visit the museum. So this is about this live broadcasting. Thank you for watching.